If you enter just about any antique store and ask if they have a typewriter, chances are good that if they say yes, they will show you one of these, the Underwood No. 5. Probably the decidedly most common antique typewriter there is. Despite being around 100 years old, they were built so well and in such quantities that they can still be found just about anywhere. The challenge for any collector then obviously isn't to simply find one, but rather to find one in as pristine condition as possible. There are any number of issues that an actual century of existence can bring. Desktop models meet many struggles through its life. They face exposure to dust, humidity, and sunlight, as well as having to survive a number of generations of family members who, at likely several points in their lives, reconsider any clutter they have lying in their homes. This is why many enthusiasts get a little extra excited when they see one of these shell covers. If the previous owners managed to keep that shell, then it could mean that they made a point of covering up the machine when it wasn't in use. And if they did that, then there is a chance that that machine underneath can look as good as this. So what did Underwood do that made it so popular compared to other brands at the time? How did they manage to become the best-selling typewriter in history until IBM launched their Selectric in the 60s? Just before the change of the century, several manufacturers were investing into the development to create a typewriter that was referred to as a visible typewriter. This refers to a style of typewriter that would print on a paper in a way that made it immediately visible to the typist without having to interact with the machine to flip the text up to a visible position. Many inventors and engineers were scrambling to be the first to solve the problem, but as many business-savvy people will tell you, to be a success, you don't actually have to be the first. You simply have to be the best within an acceptable price range. We now know that the front strike approach would win the market in the end, and the arguably first machine that did it in this way was the Dougherty, later known as the Pittsburgh Visible. Its design was pretty to look at, but the construction wasn't very solid, and in trying to make it more affordable, the quality of the materials and constructions were kind of shot. It just didn't manage to pull a huge part of the market. So again, being the first doesn't mean you'll be successful. Commonly accepted history states its inventor as Franz X. Wagner, but the patent papers actually name his son, Hermann Louis Wagner, as the inventor. Perhaps Franz invented it but named his son in the papers to benefit him in the future. Perhaps his son invented it but Franz slapped his name on the machine itself because his name carried more weight in the industry at the time. The actual reason is lost to time, unfortunately. The story you'll find most places goes that Underwood bought the designs from Wagner somewhere between 1895 and 1897, but apparently that's a simplification of a messy story. A court report from 1897 seems to say that Franz Wagner didn't sell the designs to Underwood at all, but rather to another party, who then sold the designs onwards in large part to Underwood after the agreement between Wagner and the third party went sour. There are lots of history recorded in court documents from this process, but the reports are rather muddled by inconsistencies to the point that it is very hard for anyone to draw specific conclusions from it. Therefore, I'm not going to start trying either. If you're interested in the details, look up the blog post from Oz Typewriter, who have written an extensive article where he debates what is known, what is inconsistent, and what we might extrapolate from these court details. I will leave a link to it in the descriptions. Regardless of how Underwood got their hands on the Wagner designs, they released a slightly modified design as Underwood No. 1 and 2 in 1896. The models sold very well for what was a completely new manufacturer fresh out on the market, with estimates saying they produced just over 12 to 15,000 units over the next 3 years. Many manufacturers who started out much later when the market was even hotter would barely get close to the same production and sales numbers. Through these early years, Underwood likely collected feedback from customers and test panels, and they would work in some changes to improve the machine. Finally, in 1900, the updates culminated in the release of their No. 3, 4, and 5. Perfection had arrived. The No. 3 being the wide carriage version of the No. 5, and the No. 4 being a slightly cheaper version of the No. 5. The models number 4 and 5 are actually not that easy to distinguish from the older number 1 and 2. If the 4 or 5 model is in reasonably good condition, the front decals on the frame around the keyboard will be intact and will reveal the model by flat out telling you what it is. The 1 and 2 had no such decal on the front. If the decals are worn off, there are of course other details that can identify them as well. One indicator that you'll read about is the presence of a rear decal that mention Wagner Typewriter Co. But there actually exist late number 1 and 2 models that only mentions Underwood on the rear, and there even exists early number 4 and 5 models that does mention Wagner. So the transition between the two decal styles on the rear was kind of weird and inconsistent, and therefore doesn't really seal in the model either. One of the signs you could look for is the wheels on the side that forward the ribbon. These are generally chromed or nickel-plated on the number 1 and 2, as opposed to blued steel on the 4 and 5. Later period productions of the number 4 and 5 removed the left wheel and has instead a single wheel on the right that works for both directions of ribbon forwarding. The second detail is the index indicator scale on the carriage. On the number 1 and 2, this is usually a steel plate with numbers engraved on it. On the 4 and 5, it is still a steel plate, but here the numbers and details are enameled. The third and probably most consistent set of clear signs are two small arms on the front that seemingly hold up the carriage section. On the number 1 and 2, these are rounded slightly out, or at least straight down, while on number 4 and 5, these are rounded in. The number 4 is the most basic model, but the models all came in various subvariants or tiers of the model. The baseline Model 4 has 38 keys, thereby supporting a set of 76 different characters. It lacked a bunch of features that was seemingly what most people wanted, so finding a baseline number 4 is actually somewhat rare. Most opted to go for something better when you first decided to invest in an Underwood standard. These tiers are 4J, serving as the baseline. One step up, the 4L added an automatic ribbon reverse. 4P had everything 4L had, but added bichrome ribbon support, as well as a black painted spacebar. It also added a backspace key, but this isn't specified in text describing the subtypes. It's only implied via pictures. Finally was the 4D, which added a lateral paper guide on the paper rest that would help you place new sheets of paper in the exact same place every time. As for the number 5, it started with the baseline of 5F. The tiers of subtypes for this model then goes to 5R, 5M and 5E, all of which add exactly the same additions as the same corresponding set of tiers for the 4, only being a model with 42 keys instead of 38. Finally was the number 3, which only came as two subtypes, 3T and 3K. The 3T was the same as the 5M, which was the second highest tier of number 5, meaning it had every extra feature save from a lateral paper guide, and only came with carriage widths of 12 to 18 inches. The 3K was the top tier, which added the lateral paper guide and came in any carriage width from 12 to 26 inches, incrementing 2 inches per step up. For all you other fellow metric folks, that's a range of carriage widths going from about 30 cm to 66 cm with about 5 cm increments. A last and more rare version of the smallest number 3 would actually be named 46. Where it normally said number 3 on the front frame, these would instead say 46. This was an export model sent to countries with a higher demand for variations in types than Americans had, and had 46 keys. Perhaps surprisingly, even in countries who had good use for these extra keys, you don't see this model that often. It could be that this model was more expensive than it was worth to most, but that's just my speculation. Underwood started out well, but soon snowballed into a true spectacle. The numbers just kept going up. They would reach their first 250,000 machines made after 9 years in 1909, but within another 8 years in 1917, they would break 1 million machines made. Add another 16 years and we get to 1933, when Underwood would start making the number 6 and discontinued the 3, 4 and 5. By the end of this production time, it is estimated that they had produced and sold somewhere close to 4 million machines. Underwood set the bar for standard typewriters. Very soon after the release of Underwood's front strike machine, it became very clear to most manufacturers that the front strike was the way to go. If you went typewriter shopping in those days, you would still find blind typewriters for several years after 1900, but they were now a dying breed. Underwood wasn't the first to make a front strike machine, but they were the first to make one that was not only visible, but also truly great to use and had that professional feeling that made it an obvious choice for the demanding client. An average number 5 back in around 1900 to 1910 would cost you around $100, and adjusting for inflation, that equals to around $3,200 in today's money. Not very dissimilar to a high-end professional laptop today, for example. Quite a significant sum, to be sure, but one that was pretty much equal to other brands making large typewriters for professional use, like for example Remington, who despite being the first manufacturers of Scholes & Glidden's original design, still didn't sell even close to the numbers Underwood did. For being a design dating back to 1900s, the number 5 is very advanced and elegant. Comparing this 1916 model to other machines from the same time, it is very impressive to look at the details within. In many other machines, when looking at the inside details, you can totally tell yourself that yeah, this looks early 1900s. But with the Underwood No. 5, once you really think about it, you kind of have to remind yourself of its actual age. Some enthusiasts and collectors may not be interested in the No. 5 simply because it's a too common machine to be interesting to them. And that's fine, but they are for sure missing out on a fantastically designed thing. The typing action of a nicely tuned No. 5 is superb for being such an old machine. It has just the right heavy feel to the keys. Not so heavy that it feels tough to use, but heavy enough that it feels solid under your fingers. The whole thing just lets all your senses know, I am quality, I am finesse. The machine looks brilliant and iconic, with its black lacquer paint and gold and blue pinstripes and chromed parts. It is built like a tank, and even this model being 108 years old now per 2024, it still flows great. This model has everything you could wish for. Variable line forwarding, platen ratchet release tabulator, bichrome ribbon, a great performing keyboard, lovely professional design, and a typewriter for not just your life, but for generations to come. All for about the same price that is comparable to today's high-end professional laptops, only they are considered to have a lifetime of 3 to 5 years, and this is still going strong over a century later. Some eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that the keyboard on this machine isn't a QWERTY layout, but rather OVERTY. That's right, OVERTY, not AVERTY. It's the Norwegian and Danish letter O. I hear you ask, what in the name of Eric Bloodaxe is this layout? Is this what you crazy Norwegians call a keyboard layout? No, not really, but for a very short while it kinda was, albeit unofficially. In 1917, the Norwegian government made a formal introduction of the letter O into our alphabet, and anyone who had a typewriter purchased from before this would lack this key. People started to hand in their machines to technicians, hoping to get this new letter mounted. Thing is, there was no standard saying where this letter O should be, and because there was basically no Norwegian word using the letter Q, it made some sense to swap this letter out, and thereby keep all the special characters that they might actually need. This practice was soon after completely abandoned, thankfully. Norway had a huge merchant fleet back then, and did a lot of international business. It soon became much more common to simply replace signs like the at, which wasn't widely used for pricing in Norway to begin with. That's right kids, the at is actually a very old symbol, long predating the email. It always meant at, but was used to state price per unit before, like bag of potatoes at $1. Anyway, getting back on topic. My only problem with the Underwood 5 is that the carriage is rather heavy. Returning a new line requires more effort than most other machines I've used, though not uniquely so. Some are just kind of heavy, and this is one of those. Some enjoy that, but I don't that much. Personally, I feel that the Underwood 5 is the machine every enthusiast and collector should own, or at least have owned. It should be the machine we all use as a comparison for all other machines simply because it's an attainable model. For sure there are other models out there that will probably suit you better, that will feel better to you. And in the decades that come later, there was for sure other models that are far superior to this in terms of performance. But this was the baseline. This is the trendsetter. If the Dougherty truly was the father of front strike machines, then Underwood was the stepdad that picked up the slack to finish the job after the Dougherty went out for cigarettes and never returned. It is a model that is still widely available, so most who would want one should be able to find one for relatively cheap. Granted, not necessarily one in super aesthetic condition, but very likely at least fully functional. It is built superbly robust, and the construction and mechanics are fairly intuitive. If you're someone who wants to get into typewriters and understand more about them, a number 4 or 5 would be an excellent introduction. Even if you end up breaking it while trying to explore it, sure, that would be a shame, but you wouldn't be ruining a rare irreplaceable pearl. Also, finding parts if you break a piece shouldn't be hard either. Therefore, if you're one of those enthusiasts who has thus far been thinking that the number 5 isn't interesting, well, I hope you're convinced you should at least give it a try and see what peak performance looked like 100 years ago. I hope this video has been interesting to you. Please, if you own a Model 3, 4 or 5, or have any experience with it at all, let me know how you found your Underwood experience. And if you don't have that, do consider trying to find a model for yourself and let me know then. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will want to return when my next video comes out. Bye for now.